Hello. Hello. Right, I'll pop you there. I'll pop a light on, see if it makes a difference. Yeah, sort of. Coming to chat to you about reading again. This is sort of the theme, I guess, especially if you're in the monthly members group. Lots of chat about reading and what that looks like when we're unschooling. Maybe some of the worries we have about it, and sharing our experiences with each other. But I thought, one of the thoughts I was having was learning to read can often be associated with what's the word I'm looking for? The desire for our children to learn to read books, and that reading or learning to read is highly focused around reading stories in particular. And there are a lot of children who love stories, and there are a lot of adults who love reading stories and get a particular buzz when our children learn to read books, and they love books and they want to maybe buy books all the time, or go to the library and get books, or listen to audiobooks. But there are children, and actually a lot of adults, but there are children who really aren't interested in stories. And in our culture, I guess, our experience, reading is primarily taught to our children through storybooks. In a previous live, I mentioned in a previous video, Biff, Chip and Kipper, that's the Oxford Reading Tree. It's very popular with schools. There are others, but they are based on stories. There are other phonics books that have been written by very well-known authors. I know Julia Donaldson contributed to some based around phonics, and they're all storybooks. I imagine this has come out of the fact that stories are engaging for most children. It's a really lovely way if you're going to teach children to read. Stories are fun. And most stories for particular age groups come with pictures, and that's really easy. And so they have a level of interest. They provide a level of interest. So we're going to call that the motivation. We talk about motivation in unschooling. We talk about intrinsic motivation, when the child is driven to do something themselves. Whereas when you're teaching something to someone, you have to provide sort of the hook or the fun or the motivation. So stories do that. So we have this idea that when we talk about reading and learning to read, there's sort of a notion that we are referring to reading stories, and children loving stories and reading storybooks. And of course that's wonderful, and if children if that's their thing and they love doing it, that's amazing. But there are a number of children who actually aren't interested in that, even when they have learnt to read. In fact, it's fairly common with schooled children, once they learn to read, they're not interested in stories, because quite honestly, most of their life has been sucked out of the joy of reading for pleasure by that point, because of the arduous nature of having to learn to read when you find it really difficult for whatever reason. If you wanted to say hi in the comments, you can say hi, that'd be really nice. Anyway, so I guess the point I was making was that reading can be anything that is children interpreting the squiggles on a page, which are letters. Groups of letters form words. Not even necessarily on a page, you see, because I've talked about it there. On a page, might not be on a page, might be on the back of a cereal box, might be the name of your road that you live on, or a road that your friends live on. It might be the word play. That was like a first word in our house. Play, pause and stop. Had nothing to do with reading books or even listening to audiobooks. It was all related to gaming. Zombies. We were really into Minecraft. So zombies, that was one of my eldest's first words that he recognised consistently. Recipes. That's not like a storybook. Recipes, poetry. There's just so many different ways that our children can access reading and the written word that aren't stories, and ways that they will be more motivated by. I mean, gaming is really probably a more modern one, that's the one that a lot of our children who aren't interested in stories, or maybe who are but simultaneously like gaming, that they access or begin to recognise words. Somebody's written a comment, so I'm going to read it, from playing Minecraft. Yeah, inspired. Someone's written that in their experience, their son, it's Anna, I shouldn't say someone, hi Anna, inspired to learn to read from playing Minecraft and want to be able to read what was on the screen without help. So that again is about the motivation, and the context is something that is relevant to them. So if your child really likes cooking from a recipe, I've got a child who likes cooking but not from a recipe, but from a recipe, they become motivated to read for themselves so that they can become more independent in what they are doing, for example. And they might not. It might be that they're happy for you to read the instructions to them, but through that, you reading things that are familiar. And this is very similar to when children do like stories and they want the same book over and over again. There's lots of reasons children do that, but one of them is realising or coming to the realisation that the story is read the same every time, that those words on the page don't change, that when you are reading them, you are saying the same words over and over again. And sometimes children learn stories, particularly short stories, by rote because they've heard them so many times, and it can appear that they're reading the words, but they have actually memorised them, and they are repeating and regurgitating something that has become incredibly familiar to them. But also they can begin to associate the words that you are saying with the shapes and the words that are written on the page. They can begin to recognise things like, for every word that you verbalise, there is a written correspondence, a shape, a collective of shapes on the page. So when you say 3 words for that page, there are 3 separate words, shapes written on the actual physical page, and they begin to make the association between what you're saying and what is written, and they recognise those shapes to the words that you are saying. And that is one of the ways in which children learn to read. But it's the same like with recipes. If you are reading a recipe, there will be familiar words in recipes. So if you particularly like baking, there'll be things like stir, mix. If you like rubbing the flour, so there'll be like rub, and there'll be certain words as well as really common words like at, a, the, and will be in there as well, that they will become more and more familiar with, even if you're the one that's reading it to them the majority of the time, or even all the time. Those are things that they will begin to recognise and associate with what you're reading to them in the context of the example. We're talking about recipes, and they will acquire this gift of reading, but not necessarily through storybooks. So we've talked about recipes. Gaming was a big one for us, like reading the daily challenges on games, reading the instructions on new games. So instructions come, you know, board games have instructions. You know, if you buy furniture or Lego, for example, comes with instructions. And some of you might say, yes, but Lego doesn't have words. It's only pictures. Those sort of things still contribute towards our children's ability to read, which is very nicely going to bring me to a point in a minute. And Anna is just saying, yes, both her children have learnt books before they were reading. The Gruffalo was a favourite. There are certain books that I have read probably in excess of 100 times easily. Bearing in mind, I spent probably 10 years reading children's literature to children before I even had my own children. There are certain books that my children can read to me now, and even if I'm not looking at the pages and the words, I know if they get stuck on a word, I know exactly what word it is. I know what's happening. Yeah, very, very familiar. We're going on a bear hunt. I could probably recite that backwards. Definitely the Gruffalo, that one's in there as well. The Cat in the Hat. Lots and lots of different stories. And just having Charlie and Lola. We'll have a Charlie and Lola book. I'm trying to think now, actually. Lots of John Birmingham books. And certainly a lot of stories that I'm very familiar with that are maybe longer short chapter books or chapter books. Anyway, so there's lots and lots of reasons why our children might choose to learn to read that are not for the love and the joy of reading, which I know is really sad, and I do feel it in my own heart because I do love a good book, and I love buying books and I love reading books. And it isn't that won't happen for some children, but it does not happen for some children. For some children, reading is a very practical skill to acquire. It doesn't always have the outcome that is fabulous, joyful connection with storybooks. But for those who are unschooled, and for those who like stories, that love of reading storybooks and fiction is not altered or hindered in any way because of their experience of learning to read, which is a very great thing. There was something I talked about that I thought led really neatly into what I'm going to be doing on Thursday, which is the reading webinar. And I think it was about this idea of things that your child is doing that are essential for their reading skills. Oh, it was the Lego instructions. So things that we look at and have very little to do with reading or nothing to do with reading. So for example, Lego instructions, some people might look at that and say that there's no reading involved in that because there's no words. And that's what I'm going to be talking about on Thursday. In fact, I think I've got it to three things that our children are doing probably every day in the activities that they are choosing to engage with that are contributing to them being able to read. So if you're interested in finding out what they are, if your child is pre-reading, and it doesn't matter what age your child is, whether your child is 4 or 8 or 12, if you would consider them pre-reading, so maybe not showing an interest in the written word, even a recipe book, or on their gaming, or stories, if that's something that they're not interested in at the moment and you're wondering how on earth they are going to learn to read, or even when they are going to learn to read. That's what I'm doing on Thursday. These 3 things that children are doing in their day-to-day lives that are contributing to them building the skills and the foundations, strong foundations that they need to be able to read. And I'd love to see you there if that's your thing. I'll pop a link. I'm trying to get used to how to do this. I think I could put a link in now, but I haven't quite figured it all out. I'll pop a link in the comments for that, or you can have a look on the Facebook page, because I've mentioned it a few times, so I'm sure you will find it there if you scroll a bit. I know that's not very sticking barriers in the way. It's not very user friendly. I'll try and stick a link in. Yes, and then the other one I've got is a webinar that I've already recorded, which is 4 things that you can do to help your child learn to read that isn't using phonics or flashcards. So 4 things that you can do, and I guarantee actually you are probably doing all 4 of them. Actually, you're probably doing all 4 of them without even knowing it already, but it's reassuring and confidence building for you guys to know that that's what you need to be doing, and that you're doing them. And that's available as well as a pre-recorded one, and I think it's on offer this month because it's the month of reading. And I'll pop that in too. Anyway, unless anyone's got any other comments or wants to ask me a question, which I will just waffle on a little bit more in case somebody wants to write something. What else could I tell you about? I don't know, I'm a bit lost. Understanding unschooling, I'll just tell you about that whilst, in case someone's writing a question. Understanding unschooling is the coaching course I'm running. It starts a week Friday. There's only 10 days left to book. It's 6 group coaching sessions every Friday, for 6 weeks. And it's based on 6 modules, which you also get, which are pre-recorded, and there's a little workbook. And then once those 6 weeks are finished, you get me for an additional 6 weeks as well, because typically I found that people, well, it's a self-directed course, so really you can watch the videos as you like. So it just gives people a little bit more time to access those videos and ask me questions, and have some ongoing coaching during those next 6 weeks as well. So it's about 3 months concentrated time with me by your side, and you can access that as well. It looks like no one has any questions, and thank you for joining me, and I will speak to you all again soon. Bye.